Hello everybody, this is GeneralJannis, and today I'm looking at Mortarion, the Lord of the Death Guard, our supreme leader and the host of the plagues, and which one is best to choose, and is it worth all the points at all. So with no further ado, let's get started. So today, the 31st of March, happy Easter everybody, at least the people part of Christian Western churches. In the Eastern churches, the Easter is in a month from now, and sometimes it coincides, sometimes it's 1 week off, and this year it's one month off, and this is very interesting mathematical and cultural question. I would like to make a video about that one, but let me know if you would like to hear something else. But let's say in this video we'll look at a comment from Pissed Off Pastry, who would like to see a comparison of Morty's Host of Plagues, because he always seems to choose to increase the contagion range by 3 inches. So in this video I will be looking at Mortarion, his datasheet and the damage, just a quick look, because I made in the beginning of 10th, I made a comparison of all the Primarchs when we had their datasheets and the first points, and there we could see Mortarion was not very strong hitting. I'll post a link to that video as well. And then I'll move on to the host of plagues analysis, either to take the cover, reroll once to wound and extend contagion, and then finally the overall per point comparison and summary and final thoughts from Mortarion. And I have to say, for this video I was a bit like, how can you compare these things in a good way? So let me see if let's see if I could make any interesting findings here. So starting off by looking at Mortarion's datasheet. Mortarion is 325 points now. He has a toughness 12 and a nice save and 16 wounds. He has the Rotwind, the psychic, let's say shooting power. He has his pistol, his trusty, the lantern pistol. Typically, that was previously always missing somehow with ones, and you couldn't reroll it because it wasn't a plague weapon. And then his main weapon is the silence, either with a strike profile or the sweep profile, but only 5 attacks with a strike profile. His abilities, he has the Lord of the Death Guard aura, so a Death Guard unit that is within 6 inches of this of Mortarion can ignore modifiers, and this is really helpful when we're using our indirect shooting of our Plagueburst crawlers, for example. And then at the beginning of the battle round, you select one of the abilities in the Host of Plagues. You have 3 there. All of them are 6-inch auras for Mortarion that affect Death Guard, and they do different things. They can give cover, they can give reroll, wound roll of 1, and they can increase the range of the contagion by 3 inches, as our reader had commented. So taking a quick look at Mortarion's damage output, not point corrected. The commas in the tables are decimal points. We have Mortarion's four weapons in the top four rows. So we have the Rotwind, the psychic shooting, his lantern pistol, and then his silence with both a strike and a sweep profile. And we see for anything that's better armored than a space marine, like an intercessor here, it's better to use the strike profile. Here we see more damage output than the sweep profile. And then below we have for the strike profile of the silence, the baseline, and then if we add the contagion -1 save, we get 15% more damage on average across these targets. If he gives himself reroll once to wound with his Host of Plagues, this increases his damage with a strike profile 12%, and if we combine -1 save, toughness, contagion, and the rerolling once to wound, we get 30% more damage increase. Then in the last 4 rows, you see his if he's shooting at something, charging, and then doing the melee damage. This is the combined damage of the Rotwind, the Lantern, and then the Silence afterwards. If he doesn't buff himself, he could be killing, let's say, five intercessors here. He could be killing almost 3 Terminators with no further buffs, and he could make 10 wounds on a Land Raider. If he gives a -1 save, contagion, and the reroll wants to wound, he can almost take out a Land Raider. He can kill a lot of, let's say, he can kill then 3 Terminators, but it's not like he was before, where you could charge into something and that something disappeared just with a melee weapon. So he's not the melee beatstick anymore. Now, as we saw from his datasheet, he has a lot of buffing abilities and not so much the melee beatstick anymore. So His standard aura, the Lord of the Death card, gives no negative penalties for Death card. A friendly Death card unit within 6 inch of Mortarion can ignore any or all modifiers. For example, if the enemy is in -1, is in -1 to be shot or something like this, then we don't have to take that into account. And it's really good to combine this with the indirect fire, for example, from the Plague Scroller Mortar. Then we can ignore the -1 to hit. So that's probably where he's buffing most of the Death card units. And then, as I said, we can select one of the 3 abilities in the start of the round. This also is quite useful when going second if you want to give, let's say, the cover or more contagion or the rerolls already from the first round if your opponent goes first. So either you have a 6-inch aura giving cover to anything that's within the Death card units that within there, or we can give the reroll ones to wounds. So this reminds us of the good old times with the 8th and 9th edition with the plague weapons, rerolling ones to wound. That was quite fun. And then the 12-inch aura that he has, that every Death card unit within the 12 inches have a 3-inch more contagion range. That would be in round 1 from 3 to 6 inches, from round 2 6 to 9 inches, and then from round 3 and onwards that would be a whopping 12 inches for the things that are inside Mortarion's 12-inch aura here. So my thoughts then on the cover part, the Miasma of Pestilence aura. So the cover, I think, in today's terrain, many times we already can be in cover. There is a lot of runes and obscuring parts, so it's quite easy maybe to be already in cover, and then it's not so helpful that Mortarion gives an additional, let's say, cover. Maybe some idea would be if you have Mortarion escorting something that needs to go up the field and do some damage and has to pass some exposed areas, it could be a theoretical scenario where you would like Mortarion to give some extra protection. But probably if you use Mortarion in the backline with hidden Plague Scrollers, then the cover doesn't really do you a lot. They are probably already in cover, or even better, the enemy cannot see them. Of course, cover is the benefit of cover is a defensive boost versus only ranged weapons. So in melee, it doesn't have any effect. So if everything is engagement, then yeah, cover is no sense. It's really good versus AP -1 weapons for the units. Typically in Death Guard, we have a 3+ save or 2+ save for our Terminators. Then making AP with cover, then we get some very nice saving throws. It doesn't help with versus melee weapons, as I said. If the opponent is filled with flamer weapons, torrent weapons that ignore cover, then of course it doesn't help. AP0 weapons versus our units that have 2+, 3+ save, then the cover doesn't improve that in the core rules, and doesn't help either if the enemy has Meltas and shooting at your 4+ invul Terminators. The cover doesn't do anything. So there's a lot of cases where the cover wouldn't help you, and some cases where it would be quite strong. There is a theoretical situation where you could have the scenario as plotted here on the right. So let's say that I have a Land Raider that was supposed to shoot my Plague Scroller. Could I put my Plague Scroller with cover from Mortarion, or should I have selected, for example, to extend the range, the contagion range of the 13 Bloatron there? That then can maybe just get the Land Raider inside contagion, and if I had the contagion -1 to be hit, then that gives us probably a better, let's say, durability increase than the cover on the Plague Scroller here. So in this slide, I'm trying to show you the effect of being in cover or the effect of being into the enemies in the -1 to hit contagion. And on the top part, the top table here, we have some variety of weapons, ranged weapons here, because the melee that the cover doesn't have any effect. But for some of the ranged weapons here, shooting at our units from a Death Guard cultist up to Mortarion himself, you see how many shots, how many weapons, let's say, of each type are needed to kill one cultist in this respect, or a Plague Marine or Mortarion himself. So you can see, for example, from heavy bolters, you would need 86 heavy bolters with 3 shots each to kill Mortarion. Here, only 0.6 heavy bolters to kill a lowly cultist, 7 to kill a Death Shroud, and things like that. And you can see the average below with no further buffs. This is no cover, nothing at all here. You can see the average here, and if we have if all these units get into cover, we get a 46% better increase of durability. We can take 46% more shots. You can see the cover page it's the table on the bottom right. So there you can compare it. Maybe you can pause the video and print and compare something. There's a lot of data here to be able to show it in a good way. And then if you have if the enemy is in -1 to be hit contagion, provided you take that, of course, in the beginning of the game, this gives 30% more increase. And if you combine cover and being the enemy being in -1 to be hit, you get even better. And you can see the -1 to be hit. You see the effect on the bottom left table. Moving on to the diseased influence aura, where we can give a friendly death card unit reroll once to wound, so bringing back the nice plague weapon days. Rerolling once to wound for a unit that should theoretically give a 17% increase in the damage output. Basically, 17% more wound rolls are successful. But the effect is not so strong when we have lethal hit weapons, because some of the total damage, a lot of that comes also from the auto wounding rolls. The reroll ones to wound have a nice synergy when Mortarion is kept back to provide buffs for the, let's say, Plague Burst crawlers. Is it worth the points? I'll look more into the next slide. And again, the reroll ones to wound could have a theoretical scenario like the one I discussed before, where Mortarion could maybe put an enemy unit in contagion -1 save by extending the range of a friendly unit, here the 30th blow drone, and then the Plague Rush Crawler would in that case get -1 save for the Land Raider instead of rerolling once to wound. And in the table below, I try to give you the example of one Plague Rush Crawler shooting. The first 5 lines are a Plague Rush Crawler shooting at some various enemy units that it cannot see, so basically it can only use its mortar. And here you can see the damage from one Plague Burst Crawler, not taking into account extra blast shots. But for example, if we're shooting at intercessors, 2.9 wounds from the mortar itself. But if we add Mortarion there, just by ignoring the indirect fire debuff, then we would have 3.8 wounds. If we add reroll ones to wound as well, we will do 4.2 wounds on intercessors. If we had contagion -1 save on the target, that would be 5.1 wounds. And if we combine both reroll ones to wound and the enemy already is in some sort of contagion -1 save, we would do 5.7 wounds on intercessors. So you can see from the Plague Burst Crawler being alone, doing 1.8 wounds on average across the targets I'm simulating, it would go up 93% more damage to 3.4 wounds on average. If we add reroll ones to wound, Mortarion counteracting the indirect fire -1 to be hit, and we have the reroll ones to wound. At the bottom, you see all the four bottom lines. You see the Plague Burst Crawler shooting at something with line of sight. If we add Mortarion's reroll ones to wound, here we also have the entropy cannons, etc. into play. The rerolling ones to wound only gives, let's say, 11% better damage increase than the baseline here. If we had contagion ones -1 save, that's 32%, and if we combine them, we get 42% damage increase. And then the question I posed in the previous slide, is the Mortarion's reroll buff, is it worth the point? The ignoring the negative modifiers. So if we see these smaller examples here, 3 Plague Burst Crawlers at 540 points, if they are shooting their mortar with no line of sight versus a guardsman equivalent, they would do 7 wounds on average, and 8.7 wounds on Marines. Then you can see per point comparison on the right hand side. If we add Mortarion with his rerolls, the damage will increase, of course, both from ignoring the modifiers, but also from the reroll ones to wound. But then you are paying 865 points for this blob. Let's say if Mortarion doesn't do anything else, then we would be doing 10 wounds on guardsmen and 12.7 wounds on marines. But per point, it's not worth, just for the sake of this buff, it's not worth the 325 points of Mortarion. And if we look at the bottom, if we have with line of sight, the effect of the reroll itself is less. Indirect fire is more relative effect. So all in all, it's not enough damage per point to add Mortarion, even for boosting 3 Plaguebearer Scrollers, but Mortarion itself can also do something at some point in the game. If something comes to charge your Plaguebearer Scrollers in your backside, then Mortarion could be able to take something out, so it's not only there for the buff. The final possibility for the Host of Plagues, the Toxic Presence. When friendly Death Guard units are within 12 inches of Mortarion, they get plus 3 inches to the contagion range. So increasing our contagion range can put more units in, potentially more enemy units in debuff zones. The debuffs are really strong because they are universal. So also our allied units that we typically take, for example, brigands or some other knights, will benefit also from the enemy having less save, or that the enemy cannot shoot them with -1 to hit. So the -1 save, as we said, the contagion can give a strong damage increase. -1 to be hit gives a good durability increase, as we saw also previously. The contagion with -1 leadership and -1 objective control, then I think this is not so strongly to pair with Mortarion's ability. If you are contesting an objective with some enemy unit, probably that enemy is already in contagion, and if you selected -1 leadership, -1 OC, it will already be in play. So you don't need Mortarion's ability to make the aura even stronger here. All in all, as we discussed also before with the 2 other examples of cover and reroll ones to wound, I think that extending the contagion range is highly situational. Maybe it could be relevant in the early turns of the game where our contagion range is only 3 to 6 inches, to increase it by 3 inches. For many games, maybe already in turn 3 or 4, where everything has 9-inch range contagion. Maybe most of the map will already be in contagion, so maybe we don't need it. So situational, where you need to think in the beginning of the battle round how the situation will look when you have to use it. How many friendly units are within 12 inch of Mortarion that would benefit from the extension of the range? If we give them the 3 inch more, will more enemy units be debuffed in that way or not? So I guess this is highly situational. Finally, ending off with a table with Mortarion's overall per point summary. Here we see Mortarion. This is point corrected figures now. The damage versus the typical targets I'm simulating here per 100 points. And we see he doesn't have very high shooting damage at 12-inch range, basically 18-inch. And in melee, per point, he's not very strong in melee. We can compare him to some of the other characters like Lord of Contagion, Lord of Violence, Typhus. They are better in melee per point compared to the Primarch. So this is a bit disappointing that Mortarion cannot do more damage here, and of course, for the points. The durability, here I'm taking a light weapon. The index 100 means an intercessor durability. And for the heavy weapons, the index is a Rhino, so 100 points is a Rhino. So here we see the durability per point is really strong for Mortarion. He has, because with a 5+ feel no pain and 2+ saves and things like that, he's not easy to kill. And also for heavy weapons, he's stronger than a Plaguebearer Scroller per point, for example. If we look at the Plaguebearer Scroller with the Entropy and the Slugger, we see the damage output again per point and the durability. If that is blessed, let's say with Mortarion's reroll, you see a little bit more damage. This is not taking into account how many more points we added for Mortarion here. So then we have the Brigand. some Death Star Terminators, some Plague Marines, where you can see basically as a damage dealer, Mortarion doesn't cut it, and the buffs are not super strong, let's say, just to increase the damage of the Plague Scroller. Reaching to the summary and final thoughts, Mortarion is no longer the melee beatstick that he once was. He can buff death card units to counter the negative modifiers with his Lord of Death card aura. This is most helpful for the indirect fire, for example, the Plaguebear Scroller Mortar. Now, Plaguebear Scrollers are also more expensive. And as a host of plagues, Mortarion can select from the 3 other auras. The cover, I think, probably will not be very useful in reality. Maybe if we see some very different builds where Mortarion is flying off with some, I don't know, demon princes and vehicles and plague marines, and then he gives them cover until they reach somehow the enemy lines. Reroll wants to wound. That's at least easy to plan with, and it's quite consistent when you pair it, for example, with Plaguebear Scrollers, where they benefit also from the Lord of Death card aura. Extending the contagion range to me seems also quite highly situational. It could be helpful, but it takes also some planning if your opponent starts the battle round to know if it will be useful or not. It depends, of course, also what type of contagion you have selected, if how it makes sense. And all in all, I think for Mortarion, it probably depends on your gaming strategy, if you will take him or not. If you want to build a castle with the 3 Plaguebear Scrollers and Mortarion, you can do at least something with no line of sight, increase the damage, but just looking at the points, he's not buffing them enough for the 325 points alone. But as we saw also in some of these competitive lists that I have in my previous video, half the list have Mortarion, half of them have not. So it also depends on if you like to play him, how do you want to use him. Of course, there is some usefulness there, but it's a bit expensive for what he damage at least he brings. So this concludes the video. Let me know what you think about this analysis. Post your comments and questions to video so I can have some new ideas of what to do. Special thanks to all my patrons and YouTube supporters. And with these words, GeneralJannis signing out. Stay safe out there, and bye-bye.